Hello everyone and welcome to this video, guided reading of True Old English Part 4 or Ģelēded, rāding, sōþes, Ealdenglisc, Dēl Fēower. So in this lesson we begin to notice how Old English sentences naturally fit together in real prose. You have already learned the forms, verbs, noun cases, pronouns, and now we see how those pieces move and combine in slightly more complex structures. I'm just talking about sentences. I don't know if complex structures is necessarily a good word to use, but anyway, don't be intimidated by it. I really just mean sentences. You already understand them from modern English, and there's a great deal of similarity there. You may notice relative clauses, time clauses, where you put in some information in the sentence about time, and verbs appearing at the end of a clause. This is not new grammar to memorise, and I don't need you to memorise it at this stage. I'm just giving you a look at the structure. Throughout these videos for beginners, I'm giving you a look at the structure. Don't think you have to memorise things. It is simply how Old English arranges meaning. As always, look for the verb first, then see who is doing the action. If you can follow the flow of the sentence, you have already started reading Old English syntax. You started reading real Old English syntax. So take your time, read carefully, and trust the foundation you've built. I'll take you through this, point some things out. All right, that's our goal here. All right, don't feel a need to remember things. All right, so real syntax patterns. Se koning, there was good. The king who was good. In this lesson, we look at slightly more natural Old English sentence patterns. Nothing new is introduced, but the structure becomes more like real prose. Everyday language and how we'd write it down. We'll move slowly and follow the verbs carefully. Okay, so let's go here. Next page. And I think it's best I should hide that, no distractions. All right, so se koning, there was gold, lovede that folk, the king who was good. See how the clause has been inserted there, who was good, a bit of extra information. That's what clauses do, you can insert them into a sentence to provide a bit more information. Love the people. So the main clause is se koning, lovede that folk, se koning, lovede that folk. This is called a relative clause. The indeclinable, or what we call the indeclinable particle, it only has this one form, the, meaning who or which. Okay. Now this is what you could call the relative particle. Okay, and so it introduces the relative clause. So your relative clause, se there was good, who was good. Se there means who, or see the se here, it's the masculine demonstrative there. It could become he who. All right. So the king, he who was good, loved the people. Okay. Who is probably an appropriate translation in this sentence here. It could be he who. Okay. The relative clause is inserted. All right. And okay, there you go there. You might notice, okay, minor thing, but the verb here is near the end. I'll keep talking about that as we go. So that's a relative clause introduced by the relative particle the. All right, next one. Okay, now that folk lovede thona koning, there here Yasawan. The people loved the king whom, in this case whom, they saw. Okay. Now the main clause, that folk lovede thona koning, the people loved the king, and then the relative clause, no comma here, just the particle there, what we call that indeclinable particle, the relative particle, right, has introduced this bit here. There here Yasawan, whom they saw, or who they saw. Okay, whom is appropriate in modern English. Okay, so there is still who, but in translating to modern English, it would be whom would be appropriate. Notice the verb at the end of the clause here, they saw. Tha he to, Tha he to tham tuna kom, sat he on tham hele. When he came to the town, he sat in the hall. All right. Now, a couple of things that you have at the front there, a time clause. All right. Tha he to tham tuna kom, because it's something about time. When he came to the town. When he came to the town. So it's a time clause. The main clause is sat he on tham hele. Now, the actual main clause, this could have been rewritten, okay, and the time clause could have appeared at the end after hele, in which case you would have he, subject, sat, the verb, he sat, so verb second, on tham hele, comma, tha he to tham tuna kom, or even without the comma, okay? So if you were to write this normally, you might say he sat, the conjugated verb, all right, third person singular, past tense, on tham hele, tha he to tham tuna kom, okay? So this is really a subordinate clause, but it's been taken from the rear here and placed at the front. And that is done in order to emphasize the time aspect. We want to emphasize that when he to the town came, when he came to the town, okay, he sat on the hall. He sat in the hall. All right. Now, normally you might say, well, he sat on tham hele, tha he to tham tuna kom. All right. So he sat in the hall when he came to the town. But the speaker here wants to emphasize when he came to the town. That's important, right? Then he sat in the hall. Okay. Now, another thing to notice. So normally a sentence would be he sat on tham hele, tha he to tham tuna kom. All right. Notice the verb then would be second here. Okay. Subject, the nominative would be first. But when we put subordinate clause here to the front, inversion, when we put it to the front, then we have a verb at the end in the subordinate clause, kom. Notice how it's the end of the whole clause. But we also invert. Instead of he sat, it becomes sat he. So notice you get here verb, comma, verb, like you do with modern German. All right. So there is a strong tendency for this to happen. It doesn't have to happen always. It's not an absolute rule. Old English is a bit more flexible that way. In modern German, it's a rule, verb, comma, verb. But in Old English, there's a very strong tendency to do that, but it's not absolute, unlike modern German. Okay, so just be aware of that. So our main clause would be, he sat in the hall, which would be, he sat on tham hele. And then you'd have the subordinate clause, this one. But in this particular case, there's been an inversion of the subordinate clause to the front because you want to emphasize when he came to the town, right? And then you want to talk about how he sat in the hall. So, and when you do that inversion, you must take this verb sat and put it to the front, okay? Sat to the front, so that you get verb, comma, verb. I hope I make that clear. So the subordinate clause first here, the verb comes before subject in the main clause. Just be aware of that. Now, it is not an absolute rule. Old English is more flexible than that. All right. Time clause with verb at the end. So, tha he that land yasech was he believer. Okay. When he saw the land, he was happy. Now, again, it's that case of inversion again, because you could say he was happy when he saw the land. But you want to emphasize something about when he saw the land. You want to emphasize. No doubt, you can imagine a king standing there when he saw the land. You want to emphasize that. He was happy. Okay? So the time clause is tha he that land yasech, when he saw the land. And main clause now becomes, you have to invert the subject and the verb so that you get here verb, comma, verb. All right? Otherwise, you would have, he was believer, fa he that land yasech. He was happy when that land he saw, when he saw land. Okay? But you want to emphasize when he saw the land. You want to put that first. So you get this inversion here between the subject and the verb. Okay? All right. Now, moving the time clause in front of the main clause pushes the verb was into first place. Okay. In modern English, we say when he saw the land, he was happy. The verb is in the second place because modern English is a verb second language, like all other Germanic languages. But in Old English, when you move the subordinate clause from the end here to the front, okay, you get this inversion. So you get verb, comma, verb. No, it is not an absolute rule. I don't wish to give you that. There's a very strong tendency for this to happen. In most cases it happens, but not always. All right, so just be aware of that. The other thing, I had a question the other day about the H. So an H here in the end is yasech. See the yasech, the fricative sound, okay? Sometimes maybe that's not always coming through on the videos. Maybe some people may not be picking up the fricative part, but it is there. Someone asked me, was it a k sound? And it occurred to me, maybe I wasn't pronouncing it strong enough. Maybe I was pronouncing it as yasek. Maybe I was softening the fricative sound, but it's actually there, okay? So yasech. Now, I've overemphasized the fricative part. I've overdone it, but it's not a k sound. Okay. All right. Next one. Let's move on. Now, here we go. Hier luvedon hinne for thumb the he richtwis was. All right. They loved him because he was just. All right. Richtwis just. Okay. Main clause, here luvedon hinne. There you go, main clause. And then the cause clause or subordinate clause. Clause because there's a reason, hence cause, but also it's just a subordinate clause. This var thumb there is a subordinating conjunction, if you want technical terms, subordinating conjunction, and it tells you you're dealing with a subordinate clause. Notice in the subordinate clause, the verb is at the end of the subordinate clause. Var thumb there he richtwis was. Okay. Here they luvedon hinne, him. All right. Next one. Se koning, se the Mitchell was on his riche rade mit tham witan. Tha he on tham tuna sat. The Mitchell here should have a dot above the C. It's just, I've missed that in the proofreading. Sorry about that. See the C dot here, the palatalized C, it should be in there as well. My apologies, everybody. Please think of that as a C with a dot above it, palatalized, meaning Mitchell. It's not Mikkel. Now, the king who was great in his kingdom, he who was great in his kingdom, rāding took counsel with the wise men when he in the town sat, right? When he sat in the town. So the main clause, relative clause, time clause is what you have, and I've got a bit more space on the next page to go through that, so I'll go through that now on the next page. Here we go. Se koning, se the Mitchell, was on his riche, a long I too, by the way, rade mit tham witan, tha he on tham tuna sat. The king, who was great in his kingdom, took counsel with the wise men when he sat in the town. So the main clause is se koning, rade mit tham witan. Remember, there's a double D there. Rad, de, double D. Right? Both D's are pronounced. Mid tham witan. The king took counsel with the wise men. That's the main clause. It can stand on its own as a complete sentence. It doesn't need anything else. Who great was in his kingdom. Just with riche there, I do mean long I actually when I think about it. Riche. Okay, I can get away with riche. we all know what we mean. So who was great in his kingdom? That's the relative clause. Now, who was great in his kingdom? I mean, that's not a full sentence. It can't stand on its own. It's a subordinate sentence or a relative, not sentence, sorry, subordinate clause. It's or relative clause. Relative because it begins with the relative particle there. Another subordinate clause is the time one. Tha he on tham tuna sat. All right. So when he sat in the town. Now, when he sat in the town, it's not a full sentence. It's not a complete sentence like the king took counsel with the wise men. That's a complete sentence, okay? You've got the subject, you've got the verb, okay? You've got the object there. That can stand as a sentence in its own right. But these two subordinate clauses can't stand in sentences in their own right. They're not complete with the information, all right? Okay, so there we go. Just remember that. Notice subordinate clause here, the tendency of the verb to go to the very end. Here it hasn't, but there's a general tendency of the verb to move to the end. Now, let's move on. Pronoun ambiguity. Okay. Das barakon menna med tham kuninga tha he to him kom. All right. Now, watch out. You might get confused by he, him, them in this case. Menna, the people. By the way, menna means people, not just males. Then the men spoke with the king when he came to them. I've used it as men here, and it often is that way. But man, singular, is person. Okay, if you want to talk about a male, you can specifically a male, you can say where. If you want to talk about specifically a woman, you can say weef. Right. Then the men spoke with the king when he came to them. All right, so now what you have is the main clause, Thas barakon menna mid tham kuninga, right? Then the men spoke with the king. Time clause is added, Tha he to him kom. Okay, subordinate clause, notice the verb at the end there, kom, came. Okay, verb at the end of the subordinate clause. Generally, in subordinate clause, the verbs are going to go to the end, but not always. It's not an absolute rule. Most of the time, yes, there's quite a bit of time. I think there's been some research done on this, and it's about like 60% to the end. And then that's at the absolute end, sorry. And then there's a small percentage where there might be one word between the verb and the end. So maybe it's roughly 3/4 or something, roughly. I'm sort of pulling that figure out of the air a bit, roughly where maybe a bit more, 3/4 or a bit more where the verbs go to the end or near the end. All right. It's not absolute hard fast rule. Okay, so main clause, Thas barakon menna mid tham kuninga. The time clause, subordinate clause, Tha he to him kom. All right, next one. Now, if you have a look here, you could try to translate this. So we'll read through this and then pause the video if you will, and see if you can translate it for yourself. Write down what ideas are, and then we'll have a look at the answer over in the next slide, okay? Se kuning, se there was gold, luverde that folk ludde thona kuning, there here ye sawan. Tha he to tham tuna kom, sat he on tham hele. Here luverdon hinna, for tham the he richswis was. Have a think now, just pause the video at this point, stop, have a think about what's being said there, write it down if you need to, and then just be ready because shortly I will just pause a little bit longer and then I'm going to go on to the next slide and have a look at the solution. All right, so are we ready? Can I start the video back up again and we'll move on? Okay, so here he was. The king who was good loved the people. Se kuning se there was good, luverde that folk. The people loved the king whom they saw. That folk luverde thona kuning. There here ye sawan. When he came to the town, he sat in the hall. He to tham tuna kom, sat he on tham hele. They loved him because he was just. Here luverdon hinna. Vartham the he richt wis was. All right. Now let's have a look at a purpose clause with infinitive. So, se koning eerde tot them tuna tos beretjene mit them witam. So the king went to the town to speak with the wise men. To speak with the wise men. Tos beretjene mit them witam. So the main clause is se koning eerde tot them tuna. The king went to the town. Complete sentence is its own right. Then the purpose clause, tos beretjene mit them witam. To speak with the witam. Now, if you have a look here, what you have is a clause because it can't stand on its own because who's speaking with the witan? It's not clear. It's not so it's not an independent sentence. A sentence in its own right. It is a subordinate clause. It's not a full sentence. There's not enough information in it to make it a full sentence. All right. The infinitive, tos beretjene. This is the inflected infinitive you'll find in the dictionary entries. And here you have plus a dative noun. So you have a preposition here. So then this is in the dative. Tham is in the dative or the. And witan is in the dative, if you look it up, for wise men, the council, right? The witan. All right. And this is expressing purpose, this form here. You have a subordinate clause expressing purpose. All right, let's move on. All right, indirect statement. Okay. Hij sagde dat hij tomorgen komen. Okay, he said that he would come tomorrow. Now, you've got a subject, you've got a verb, and you've got a complete sentence here, okay? He said that he would come tomorrow. The main clause, hij sagde. I didn't mean the G dot there, but I've got it. Sagde. 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 It's a little bit of a fricative velar sound, okay? Hij sagde dat hij tot morgen komen. Tot morgen komen. That he would come tomorrow. So the that clause introducing indirect speech, sorry. Verb at end of the subordinate clause. Notice in the subordinate clause, because the that is also a subordinating conjunction, so that introduces a subordinate clause, a clause that cannot stand as a full sentence. Okay, so it's a clause. Okay, the that introducing a subordinate clause. Okay, whenever you see that, that's what happens. All right, next one. Se koning Jesech thamena, and thamena sparakon mit him. Notice mid the preposition here, and then this becomes the dative plural. This him can be dative singular, one person, one male. Him can be the plural, dative again, plural. So just it's context that tells you which one is which. Mena is plural. Okay, so this is plural and not just male either. The king saw those men, and those men spoke with him. Okay, se koning Jesech thamena, and thamena sparakon mit him. Right, and is what's called a coordinating conjunction. All right, not a subordinating one. It is a coordinating one. So what that means is you have two sentences of equal grammatical weight. All right, let's have a look over here. So you have two main clauses: se koning, Jesech, thamena, and coordinating conjunction, not subordinating, coordinating. Thamena sparakon, mit him. The king saw those men, can stand in a sentence in its own right. And those men spoke with him, can stand as a sentence in its own right. So the main clause, se koning Jesech thamena, the king saw those men, and the coordinating conjunction, thamena sparakon mit him. Okay? And, but, a couple others, if, and yet coordinating conjunctions. I think I have all of those correct. All right, now dative of interest. Now, him, dative at the beginning, him was Mitchell Belize, tha hey that folk yesech. Okay, him was Mitchell Belize, tha hey that folk yesech. To him there was great joy when he saw the people. Now, when you see him in the dative there, when you translate a dative, the way to do it is to put a preposition in front. To is a preposition, okay? You put an appropriate preposition in front, okay? And generally it's, when you translate, it's often the word to, okay? Or for, or you know, something like that. So to him is how you translate that. You'll learn that later on. Yeah, I've got some later videos in this series, but after this particular video, the very next video, I'm going to have a look at this dative and how to interpret sentences, clauses with this dative in the front, because I want to talk a little bit further about it, because it looks odd, doesn't it? You've just got him was Mitchell. It's very old English, but it's not modern English. We don't do that in modern English. We will say to him there was great joy. Okay, so the dative first. Him was Mitchell Bliss, and there should be a C dot above that. Unbelievable how I miss these. To him. So when we translate to modern English, we go to him. Okay, but you understand when you translate the dative in Old English, you're going to put a preposition in front. Was great joy. To him was great joy. Sorry. Tha hey that folk yesech. Okay, so again, we've got a tha here, which triggers a subordinate clause. Dative pronoun at start, and a whole video on just this one thing. There's dative at the beginning and explaining sentence structures like that and what happens when you see them. Okay, a whole video just on that. Won't be a long video like this one, that's for sure. All right. He wolde gaan forth, ak that folk hinne heet sitan. And notice here, ak is also a coordinating conjunction. So you get a main clause and a main clause. All right. He wished to go forth. Walter wished to go forth. But the people him commanded to sit. Okay. The infinitive construction is that we've got a gaan here near the end, and you've got sitan here, which is the infinitive form, and it's called an infinitive construction. All right, so he wolde gaan forth, ak that folk hinne heet sitan. He wished to go forth, but the people commanded him to sit. Okay. You notice here, you've got hate, sitan. You've got the two verbs at the end. Okay, here. Just the way it works out this time around. He wolde gaan forth. He wished to go forth. Yeah, okay. He wished to go forth. Main clause. Contrast clause. Ak that folk hinne heet sitan. But the people commanded him to sit. So wolde gaan, modal plus infinitive, modal verb. Heet sitan, strong verb plus infinitive. Hence the infinitive construction on the previous slide. Hinne is the accusative object, okay, and it stands for him, singular him, singular. All right, embedded time plus cause. Okay, so tha he on tham tuna was, believe there war on men, for tham there he, forith boroch te. Okay, I've overemphasized the H there just because of you asked me that particular question. I just want to make sure that fricative sound is coming out. So I've overdone it a little bit. When he was in the town, the men were happy. Happy were the men. Notice the subordinate clause here and the verb near the end. Because he brought peace. Notice the verb at the very end. Time clause, main clause, cause clause, verb final in the subordinate structure. So I think over here, Tha he on tham tuna was believe the waren men for tham the he foreth boroch te. When he was in the town, the men were happy because he brought peace. So the time clause, tha he on tham tuna was, okay, time clause at the front there, okay. Main clause, believe the waren men. The men were happy, okay. And this believe here, happy were men, or men were happy. For tham the he forith boroch te, because he brought peace, and the clause at the end there, pushing the verb to the end as well. Now, tha he on tham tuna was, waren believer men, was happy the men. All right, we could have had that as well. All right, now, so that brings me to the end. Stop hiding that. Okay, stop hiding that. Okay, thank the for tham the Ieithas Rawe Ġelēded. Thank you for watching this series. Ichem fara lokende to Yeseone eo ele on thara nichstan. I look forward to seeing you all in the next video. Thank you very much for watching. Please push the like button and subscribe from the channel. It would greatly help me, and I would greatly appreciate that. At any rate, take care of yourselves. Keep learning, keep growing, keep developing. It's very important in life. Keep learning, don't stop. And just one thing on the question of palatalization, the G dot and the C dots, you can imagine the palatalization in Old English occurred after the migrations to the British Isles. So you can imagine the very early stages and before the migrations, there was no C dots and G dots. There was no ch and y sound. All right. There would have been hard G, g, and the fricative G, like that. There would have been with the C there, k, and that would have been it. But palatalization has crept in, and throughout the Old English period grew. So you can imagine very initially there wasn't palatalization. These were all hard G's or fricative G's, and this was a hard C. Now, I don't know if that's absolutely correct or not. My understanding is that palatalization occurred after the migration period. So anything before that, and at the very beginning of the migration period, there would not have been that palatalization of C and G. So the language changed across the Old English period. So, you know, like from like 450 to 1060 or 1100 or whatever. So, yeah. So you can imagine very early on, it wasn't there. So it sounded differently again. All right. Now, so just be aware that if you're not sure what to palatalize, if you did leave it out, it's not exactly wrong because earlier in Old English, they didn't have palatalization. Anyway, just something to think about. I don't really know what the answer is. I'll try to keep the palatalization in there, but not overdo it. There's a danger you can palatalize everything. Don't forget, if you've got C or G before N, L, or R, that suppresses palatalization, so don't get carried away there. And quite possibly, if you've got a N, L, or R just after the C and the G, there's also no palatalization. Okay, so just the L, N, and R probably suppress it, and that helps you to keep down the amount of palatalization. Otherwise, you're going to be palatalizing quite a lot, and that's probably very, very likely not correct. All right, thank you very much for watching. I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe wherever you are. I look forward to seeing you in the next video, so please take care of yourselves. Bye for now.